Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midlands online worship service. My name is Susan Meyer and I will be your worship associate for this morning's service. If you haven't already, please type into the chat box who you are and who you brought with you today. Unitarian Universalism is a welcoming and inclusive religion. It encourages us to keep open hearts and minds because our own experience, conscience, and reason are the final authorities in religion. It affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person and that we are all connected to each other and the earth. If you are visiting us today, a special welcome to you. We appreciate you spending some of your Sunday morning with us. If you have any questions, please let us know in the chat box, by phone, or through our Facebook page. If you have been attending for some time and feel that this is your spiritual home and you're considering becoming a member of the fellowship, please contact our minister, Reverend Eric Severson, or a member of the welcome team, or let us know of your interest in the chat box. If you have a chalice or a candle at home and would like to join in our chalice lighting remotely, now would be a good time to get that ready. We will include joys and sorrows this morning, as we normally do during the service. If you want to participate, you will find the participant icon and raise your hand for that. We will now move on to announcements. You will see them on your screen. Our virtual annual meeting is today at 12:15 p.m. Please arrive promptly. The annual meeting documents, the annual report, 2021 candidate bios, 2021 proposed budget, agenda, and guidelines were sent in the newsletter. They are available on our Facebook group in the announcement section and available at uufom.org, where then click the annual meeting for all the documents. If you have any questions about the process, please contact Wendy at office@uufom.org. There will be no breakout sessions today after the service due to the annual meeting. We know you really look forward to connecting with each other, and they will be available next week. Today, we will post the discussion question on our Facebook group to connect. It's sharing tree time. Tags are available to purchase gifts for those in need at www.uufom.org 2020 Sharing Tree. Tags will be identified by number. Claim a number or numbers by emailing Wendy at office@uufom.org. Wendy will confirm by emailing back the picture of the tag and remove that tag from the website. Print your copy of the tag, or if you do not have access to a printer, let Wendy know and she will mail the tag. Currently, all tags are available, though I checked this morning and some were already gone. All gifts should be either unwrapped or placed in a gift bag with the gift tag taped to the outside. You can return the gifts to the large bin on Maxine's front porch, 2614 St. Mary's Drive. If you are unable to deliver it, please contact Maxine and she will arrange pickup. You can also deliver it to another Sharing Tree location or directly to the Salvation Army. Please return all gifts by December 2nd. Next Sunday's service will be called Healing the Planet, led by our minister, Reverend Eric Severson. Assuming a shift in US politics and a return to the Paris Climate Accord, we just might have a chance to slow global warming. Join us as we explore some of the dynamics needed to stabilize systems and help the planet heal itself. Watch your email for more announcements in our Candle Flame newsletter. It will be circulated on Fridays. If you wish to submit an article, please email it to Wendy Altner by Wednesday at 5 p.m. to include it in the upcoming issue. The Thanksgiving holiday is coming up, So article submissions for November 27th are due Sunday, November 22nd at 5 p.m. If you have a candle or chalice at home and would like to light it now, please do so. Please join in reading our chalice lighting words today by Reverend Paul Specker. We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky, above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery. Now Reverend Eric will share the opening words.
Thank you, Susan. Again, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Our opening words today by the Reverend Margaret Keepe are brief. As surely as we belong to the universe, we belong together. We join here to transcend the isolated self, to reconnect, to know ourselves, to be at home. Here on earth, under the stars, linked with each other. Come, let us worship together.
Thank you, Eric. With your mics muted, please join us in singing our opening hymn, We Are a Gentle, Angry People, by Holly Neer, accompanied by Sarah Nussbaum.
I invite you now to center yourselves and enter into a time of reflection, meditation, or prayer. Today's meditation is adapted from a peacemaking prayer by the Reverend Eric Cherry. The history is complex. The politics are intense. The fear and anger are overwhelming, and the future is unclear. But glimpses of a hopeful vision will not be bombed into oblivion by anyone. In prayer, we call to mind the peacemakers, neighbors of differing faiths, with different histories, with different politics, with different emotions, who find room for each other in their hearts, in their dreams, and in their lives. Those who hold firmly to a vision of peace and justice anywhere in the world. Spirit of life and love, be present with all who are suffering today. Lift up the hearts of those who fear and inspire courage among the peacemakers. Be present with political leaders ensuring a retreat from violence and a procession toward peace. Guide the hands of all those who are caring for the injured and the sick, the hungry and the grieving, and open our own hearts to compassion. Remind us of our complicity and responsibility, and lead us toward generous engagement, and move us always toward a vision of peace. Amen. Our story today is the story of Indra's net, and this comes to us from the ancient subcontinent of India, East India. The story of Indra's net. Far, far away in the abode of the great god Indra, king of heaven, hangs a wondrous, vast net, much like a spider's web in intricacy and loveliness. It stretches out infinitely in all directions. At each node or crossing point of the net hangs a single glittering jewel. Since the net itself is infinite in dimension, the jewels are infinite in number. The sparkling jewels hang there, suspended in and supported by the net, glittering like stars, dazzling to behold. Imagine what this magnificent jeweled net looks like, spread across the vast expanse of space. Move in close to one jewel in the net. Look closely, and you will see that the polished surface of the gem reflects all the other jewels in the net, infinite in number. Just as two mirrors placed opposite each other reflect an image ad infinitum. Each jewel reflects all the other jewels that you are gazing into, so that the process of reflection itself is infinite. Now imagine that you are a sparkling jewel in Indra's net, and so is every other person around you. Every jewel is connected with all the other jewels. Every person is connected ultimately with all the other persons in the universe. Each has their own place in the net, and we all reflect and influence each other. A change in one jewel or person changes, however slightly, produces a change, however slight, in every other. Realize too that the infinite reflections speak to how appearances are illusions. Appearances are only a reflection. The true nature of a thing is not captured in its appearance. However powerful the appearance might be, it is only a reflection of what is real. In addition, whatever you do to one jewel affects the entire net as well as yourself. You cannot damage one strand of a spider's web without injuring the entire web. And you cannot damage one strand of the web that is the universe without injuring all others in it, whether that injury is known or unknown to them. This can work for good or ill, because of course, just as destructive acts affect the entire net, so do loving, constructive, compassionate acts. A single helpful act, a simple act of kindness, can send positive ripples across the infinite net, touching every jewel, every person in existence. That is our story of Indra's net, and I invite all our families to use that metaphor today in their conversations.
Thank you, Eric. We have two readings today. Our first is excerpts from Introduction to Bridging the Urban-Rural Divide by John Icordina from the Journal of State and Local Government Review 2019. The problem. In recent years, newspaper headlines and commentators have bemoaned the growing urban-rural divide, characterized by stark differences in political and social attitudes that appear to be fueled, at least in part, by diverging economic fortunes. In our nation, survey published in 2018, Pew Research Center showed divergent demographic characteristics and political attitudes between those in urban, suburban, and rural counties. Adults in urban counties have moved more to the left in recent years. For their part, rural adults have moved firmly to the Republican camp. Moreover, many urban and rural residents feel misunderstood and looked down by Americans living in other types of communities. A study of Gallup survey data found resentment on the part of rural residents toward urban communities. Scholars conducting in-depth sociological studies of small towns and rural communities document feelings of being left behind and the growth of politics of resentment towards urban areas whose residents are perceived as having unfairly jumped to the front of the line of the American dream. The intensity of negative sentiments reveals powerful forces that are undermining livelihoods in rural areas, at the same time as they draw people to the expanding metropolitan regions. The twin forces of automation and globalization have dramatically decreased employment in the rural and small town mainstays of manufacturing, agriculture, and extraction industries. As job prospects diminish, many younger workers depart these communities, leaving an aging population behind. Those losses in turn hollow out retail and service sectors, reducing tax revenues and undermining local governments' financial health and capacity for delivering basic services, leaving little or nothing with which to finance community revitalization. The urban-rural divide is only one divide besetting the United States. We face serious social equality issues that manifest themselves as a growing income and wealth divide, a persistent and sometimes virulent racial divide, and a digital divide between those who have access to technology and those without it. These divides cut across the urban-rural divide and in many ways also exacerbate it. Within a given region, pieces of the solution. Within a given region, urban and rural areas still share a common environment and often cultural characteristics. Identifying and building upon these potential linkages and synergies is in part a matter of political will, as it requires that communities do things differently than before, but is also a matter of capacity. The more sparsely settled rural communities are, the less government capacity there is for engaging in new intergovernmental initiatives or in public-private partnerships to bring revitalization. Hence, it is doubtful that regions will realize their potential for shared prosperity without strong state policy leadership and technical support. And states will be limited in what they can accomplish without funding support from the federal government, which must be flexible so that it empowers states and localities to create the innovative regional solutions that their urban and rural challenges require. We need stronger regional coordination among states, more cooperation, cooperative agreements between localities, and a national agenda that advances social equality as it builds our infrastructure and creates healthy, multi-centered regions. Our second reading today is a quote by science fiction author and prominent humanist Isaac Asimov. There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. Let's share now in an interlude, Allegro, from Sonatina No. 2 by Beethoven, played by us today by Sarah Nussborn.
Thank you, Sarah. That was lovely. I want to thank Susan as well for tackling those readings. I know how thick those academic type journals can be, so thank you for taking that on. The waiting is over. Hallelujah. As one pundit put it last night, the arc of our children's and grandchildren's futures is a bit brighter this morning. The people have elected a new president and a historic vice president, both of whom have genuinely cared about people their whole lives and have served the public good for decades. The promise of love and compassion, the promise of accountability and justice, the promise of science and reason have all been renewed. Let us take a moment for a deep breath to celebrate and to rest in the warm glow of a commitment that love will overcome hate. thus relieved, let us acknowledge too that it was a very close contest. Nearly half of the electorate, 47.7%, more than 70 million people voted to maintain the disastrous and divisive status quo. Nearly half of our nation's voting population has shown a willingness to overlook the cruelty of federal agents separating immigrant children from their parents and putting them in cages, the willful ignorance and denial of science, the unchecked violence and abuses of power by law enforcement, the lack of any coherent national strategy to address either the pandemic or global warming, the encouragement of racist, sexist, homophobic, and xenophobic positions, actions, and conspiracy theories, an ineffective and obstructionist Congress, and the obscene redistribution of wealth from the middle class to wealthy elites and corporations. The list could go on and on. Waiting for election results has been agonizing. 2 days after the election, minister colleagues of mine shared on social media their heartbreak and lamentations that a clear repudiation of the actions and policies of the current administration did not materialize. Here's a representative sample, quote, "I never thought a presidential election would elicit this much trauma response in so many people I love and in me. This is not the America I was promised as a child. We are seeing clear evidence that this president it wasn't just a failed let's try it, haha, but a symptom of such deeper toxicity in our nation." Another said, "If ever there was a year for a landslide, it should be this one. The fact that it isn't means I have to question whether I will ever again be represented by my government." Yet another countered that, quote, "The madness we are witnessing in our country today is who our country has been for 400 years. We know this. This is nothing new. But the disease is out on the surface now, again. And yet, how is it that I am just now, we, speaking to white ministers, are only now at this level of outrage about it? Isn't it a privilege, I'm asking myself, to not engage with those I disagree with? Black Americans have had to do that every single day of their collective lives for all these centuries. Finally, one colleague posted about the need to do the hard work of engagement with those very people who trip the wire of rage within us. This begs the question, how might we Unitarian Universalists engage with people outside our walls and with whom we disagree? Let me begin my answer by explaining some of the choices for today's service elements, starting with our story, Indra's Net. It affirms, like our seventh principle, the interdependence of all things. Indra's Net, of course, exists only on a metaphysical plane in the realm of gods and goddesses. It cannot be damaged by mere mortals like us. But it can serve as a metaphor for our social systems, in fact, all interdependent systems here on Earth. Our social fabric has been damaged and partly healed repeatedly for centuries. Damaged, I would say, by economic and social forces not entirely within our control, by systemic racism and all the isms and phobias, by the rise and fall of cults of personality, by human superstition and paranoia, by the lust for power and contempt for democratic values, and finally, by the cult of anti-intellectualism that Asimov described in our second reading, a stubborn and persistent devaluing of education, science, and reason. Last week, I admitted that when under stress, I turn to the natural world for reconnection and renewal. Knowing that this service would follow a contentious election, I selected today's chalice lighting words by the Reverend Paul Sprecher for the same reason. They called on the web of life, the sacred circle of life, the earth, the sky, above and below, and even the mystery, to sustain us in such a time. I chose the Reverend Margaret Kipe's opening words because I interpret them as speaking to an all-inclusive we, not only those of us gathered here today. As surely as we belong to the universe, we as human beings belong together. I believe that we as human beings join to transcend the isolated self and to reconnect. The Reverend Eric Cherry wrote his peacemaking prayer many years ago in the context of military and political conflict between Israel and Palestine. Sadly, his words are just as appropriate for our current political struggles here in the United States. Our history is complex. Our politics are intense. Our fear and anger are overwhelming, and our future is unclear. It would behoove us too, in months and years to come, to call to mind and even be the peacemakers. Neighbors of differing faiths, different histories, different politics, and different emotions who find room for each other in their hearts, in their dreams, and in their lives. Those who hold firmly to a vision of peace and justice. Over the past 4 excruciating days, staring at the electoral map for hours on end, what jumped out to me was all the blue metropolitan areas and all the vast red rural areas. Biden won Michigan, for example, but as this map shows, not all of Michigan. An increasing gap between people in urban and rural areas has become clearer and clearer to me. Thank you, Connie. The president-elect last night called on us all to view those with whom we disagree as opponents, but not as enemies. I would add that it does not serve either our highest ideals or the common good for us to mock, shame, or belittle others for their beliefs. I pray that our nation will not succumb to despair and mistrust, and that we will not descend into tribal warfare. How might we restore relationships, repair our communities, and heal our social ills? Where to begin? 3 pieces of a solution occur to me. Doing the internal, emotional, and intellectual work necessary, engaging in interpersonal conflict transformation, and supporting elected leaders in addressing systemic barriers, internal, interpersonal, and systemic. Theologian and author Parker Palmer described the internal piece in his book, Healing the Heart of Democracy. Quote, "For those of us who want to see democracy survive and thrive, the heart is where everything begins. That grounded place in each of us where we can overcome fear, rediscover that we are members of one another, and embrace the conflicts that threaten democracy as openings to new life for us and for our nation." End quote. As I suggested in weeks past, we are best able to serve when we have clarity about and are grounded in our sources of meaning and our values. That's the place to start, being clear about our own identities and values. and about the relationships with at least the closest nodes in Indra's net. Second is the interpersonal piece, because each of us, every jewel, reflects every other jewel. I took a conflict transformation workshop in Wisconsin in 2017. The consultant described the art of conflict transformation as being a shift from an either or way of thinking to an attitude of curiosity and openness to possibility. It is out of this that people can create win-win solutions. The shorthand for this I learned from a therapist years ago. Would you rather be right or be in relationship? That has stuck with me. I came away from the training understanding the need to explore these key questions in our interpersonal relations, which could help us in our current partisan dilemma. What are the arguments or positions being expressed? What are the underlying emotions of these positions? What needs do these emotions suggest? And rather than react to arguments or emotions, how might we meet the underlying needs and find common ground for mutual resolution? The third systemic piece involves a balcony view. John Accordino, in our first reading, offered a solution that might best be summed up by Democratic strategist James Carville's 1992 assertion. Let me say that again. John Accordino, in our first reading, offered a solution that might best be summed up by Democratic strategist James Carville's 1992 assertion. It's the economy, stupid. The solution to bridging the urban-rural divide is economic. Accordino summarized the research of several studies and journal articles. He described the well-documented flight of young people and resources from rural areas to big cities. He described how smart public policy, regional collaboration, and targeted investments of federal and state resources could provide shared regional prosperity. Experts suggested providing things like greater access to broadband internet, up-to-date equipment, and digital literacy skills. They recommended renewing intra-regional business networks with shared supply chains. And they called for state-level leadership, multi-sector coordination, and new resources to complement available federal programs. Government agencies, they said, should work more closely with universities to educate the public about these issues. And community development banks and credit unions should invest in low-wealth communities. All these systemic changes would bring urban and rural areas together and would include low-income communities and people of color as partners in the process. So, pieces of the solution are internal, interpersonal, and systemic. All of the healing work, by its nature, will be complex and incremental. Results won't happen all at once. As human beings, we have moral obligations. Helping heal our social fabric may mean clarifying for ourselves and communicating to others what our values are and why they matter to us. Every vote matters, for example, because every person matters, and because together we are committed to the democratic process. Human and civil rights matter because we agree that everyone deserves a fair and equitable chance at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's not okay to separate children from their parents because we are better than that. We must agree to treat all people humanely. The mixed emotions of these elections are real. Even as we celebrate some successes, we must grieve our losses and unfulfilled expectations. The results have clarified once again the challenges we face of healing some of the ideological wounds of our nation. These also are opportunities, as Parker Palmer put it, openings to new life for us and for our nation. The waiting is over. Let us examine our own complicity and responsibility for the current state of affairs and continue to open our hearts to compassion for ourselves and others. Let us hold firmly to a vision of unity, peace, and justice. Let us do the hard work of engaging with those who trip the wire of rage within us. And in so doing, let us remember that we are a gentle, loving, justice-seeking people, singing for all our lives. Blessed be and amen.
Thank you, Eric. We affirm the work of this fellowship and its mission through our financial contributions. We continue to rely on you paying your pledges and providing what you would otherwise drop in the collection plate. While our in-person activities may be suspended, our staff continue to work hard to provide services we need. They and the bills still need to be paid. Please give as generously as you can, and may what you give bring you joy. Please take this time to write a check if you wish and mail it to the fellowship at 6220 Jefferson Avenue, Midland, Michigan, 48640. To donate online, please stay after the service for instructions. Another option is to pay with bank auto pay, which can be arranged asking our treasurer, Vicki, for the UUFOM checking account number and have your bank set up a regular payment from your account. Thank you for your generosity. Now let's share an offertory. Minuetto Giocoso by Joseph Haydn, played for us today by Sarah Nussborn. Thank you, Sarah. With your mics muted, join Sarah in singing our closing hymn, Building Bridges, words by the women of Greenham Common Peace Occupation in England. It is a round. We will sing through the first time in unison, then feel free to join in any of the 4 parts for the second time through.
Building bridges
Thank you, Sarah. That was sweet. Our closing words today are by Portland, Oregon-based yoga instructor, Sweet Home Teacup. May we recognize and abandon the familiar attitudes and practices that do not serve the whole. We are who we are, and we have the opportunity to be who we want to be, to create a new inheritance for the future. May our thoughts, words, and actions in our daily lives assist in dismantling paradigms of oppression and suffering. May we give thanks for our individual place in time and space, to our families and our relationships that touch and change us. May we give thanks to the wise teachers who help us remember how to be and the chance to make it so. Underneath and within these stories and histories is our humanity. Being human means we are of this earth. We are of these waters. We are fire and atmosphere. We are the sun and the moon and the stars. We are all that we see. And the wisdom is revealed by looking in between. Thank you to everyone who helped make this service possible today. Thank you all for joining us. Our service is ending. We will be reconvening at 12:15 for our virtual annual meeting. The link will be in your chat. Whatever you may encounter in the coming week, please know that the love of this community goes with you. Until we're together again, many blessings.